Okay, let's begin. Hello and welcome to our Logistics Landscape webinar for the third quarter. Today we're going to be talking with our MercuryGate experts about the latest developments in transportation, supply chain, and logistics technology. My name is Michael Willard and I'm the moderator for today's broadcast. Before we begin, I want to cover a few quick housekeeping items. All attendees on today's webinar are muted already, and this session is being recorded. We'll share it with you shortly after it concludes. You can also look for a recording of this webinar in the resources section of our website at mercurygate.com. It should be available later today. Our presenters have a lot of information to share, but we're also planning to field your questions at the end of the conversation. Please submit those questions anytime using the Q&A feature on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see it near the chat box. Just be sure to use the Q&A. We'll respond to as many questions as possible during our broadcast. This broadcast does feature two very special guests that I'm excited to introduce to you now. Phil Melton is going to be driving our conversation. He's an expert in supply chain operations and technology. Phil has a long history in this space, working with global brands like Nike and Columbia Sportswear. Since 2019, Phil's been working with MercuryGate as a thought leader in global industry, product marketing, and supply chain consulting. Today, Phil's going to be talking with MercuryGate co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer Steve Blough. Steve helped found MercuryGate in 2000. That's after a successful career working for IBM Global Services. He is the chief architect of MercuryGate's transportation technology platform, and he spent his career designing, developing, and integrating supply chain information systems in ways that help lower logistics cost for our MercuryGate customers. With that, I'll step aside and let Phil and Steve begin their conversation. Hello, Phil.
Hey, Michael, and thank you so much for the introductions. And I want to thank those that are joining us today for this lively discussion, I hope. And Steve, it's always great to talk to you, and it's always great for us to get together. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I think there's many things that are going on or have been going on and still going on within our environment and the transportation logistics industry in particular. And it's just great to be with you again.
Yeah, likewise, Phil. It's always fun to sit down and chat, about transportation. It's great. It's in the news today, right? It's a very dynamic industry with a lot of varied participants and a lot of contentious, if you will, objectives for those participants. So it's great to have an opportunity to chat.
Yep, and hopefully we'll share a lot of good information with those that have joined us today. So let's go ahead and get started. So recently, the CSCMP's 3030 Annual State of Logistics, they summarized the ongoing supply chain climate, stating, hey, the logistics sector must simultaneously contend with the hangover of red-hot demand and worries of revenue diminishing and inventory swelling downturns. Further, they stated that relative stability may not ever return. So what are your thoughts on this, Steve?
Well, there's always ups and downs in our industries, overages, shortages. It's interesting times, right? The 3PLs are growing at like over 50% in the past year. At the same time, shippers are flat or maybe down a little. Some, of course, depending on the industry, right? They may be up, but I'm not trying to diminish the impact of what we're going through. But, I feel the key to access of information and the intelligence you get from that is the biggest challenge or the biggest goal that we have today. It's one thing to see to have swelling industry or inventory, but it's another thing really to be able to see where it is and understand where that excess inventory lies, right? Visibility into that is crucial, right? If you want to reduce the swelling, you got to know where it's at, right? And all too often, one place is swelling while another one's diminishing, especially big corporations, right?
True.
So if you think of the stuff just sitting around in containers or moving in trucks, these are really moving inventory. And to be able to see that and understand it and be able to maybe redirect it is crucial to being able to adapt to what's happening and making sure you're not ordering too much or letting stock get too low, right? And building that intelligence really requires visibility into the data itself. So a lot of our customers, right, get into the whole data curation process, making sure that the data is timely, accurate, because that really sets the stage for getting the intelligence out of the information that you have.
Yeah, and I know you and I've talked about information and data being the new gold and all that in prior conversations. And you're right. I mean, data, without that data, you can't really see where it is. And I know that working with some of my friends that I had back at Nike and Columbia Sportswear and others, and then just talking in the retail industry in total, they're moving their inventories all over the place, trying to get closer to the customer. They're doing a lot of stock transfers between facilities. The more visibility they have, the better. But you're right. I mean, the data has to be there for us to be able to do the right thing and be able to see where your product is. But one of the things that's interesting to me is, is this like the new future? What we've been going through for the last couple of years, is this really where we're going to be going forward? Is this a new normal? We hear people talk about that. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, these types of challenges, right, make companies a lot smarter and more resilient to what's going on, or right, they cease to exist typically, right, and change is happening faster than ever. So you see a lot of companies now paying a lot more attention to being profitable and getting stronger at what they do, and not just trying to dump stock in. It's the processes that these guys build to adapt or be able to change their business model as things happen. It changes faster than ever, as I said, and having that information to be nimble is critical. So I think this sort of, you know, need to be fast, need to be going, need to understand what's happening, just puts a greater reliance on the data and really sets the stage for companies to be able to manage the change and do what they have to do.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that too, I think, in our industry, over the last couple of years, I remember when the whole thing first started back in 20, I think it was 20, maybe it was 19, I can't remember now. It's been so long ago. It just seemed like there was this, let's hurry up and get some stuff in place so we can still manage our business. While at the same time, some people are saying, hold on, let's assess what's going on. So, you brought up a couple of words: adapt, agility, flexibility. Those things are paramount in our industry today. So one other question. Let's go to another question. So there has been some conversation around temporary cost relief that might emerge based upon the expansion of trucking capacity during the month of June, right? Which means capacity and demand are starting to kind of sync up, if you will. However, some of the port brokers, are extending into the freight. Some of those are the backup of the port, right? Extending into the whole supply chain. It's going into the rail. It's going into the trucks. It's basically getting that stuff out of the port into the rail onto the road. It just seems like that's going to continue to happen for a while. How do you see things going on, and are capacity and demand really starting to meet again or not?
Again, I think one of the interesting things about capacity is, although we're starting to see a drop in the tender rejects and stuff in the truckload world, right? Sort of across the board, individual lanes, still have peaks and valleys, and there's days where this lane is constrained on capacity, and next week it's that lane, and it's again back to that whole dynamic nature of what we're doing these days, and it's changing daily and weekly, to what was happening, say, in pre-pandemic times, right? There are things that are helping, I think. I mean, some of the digital freight guys are offsetting, some of the demands that are needed in capacity. The rail stuff is interesting, especially the government just stepped in, right, to stop a potential strike there by the workers, uh, and trying to keep that from being another crippling effect to, especially with the push on green stuff, right? I mean, think about what's going on with carbon footprint. People are trying to move from truck to rail to reduce that carbon impact, but the last thing really needed there is a strike, and it's that uncertainty then that gets people a little concerned. But I think the president did what is it, an executive committee or whatever to try to resolve this. So it's good that at least it looks for now that strike's been avoided. But it's interesting to see how the current inflation pressures start to
Mhm.
impact salaries, right? I mean, all these things are going to start to climb and actually raise inflation. And if you think of the net effect in how much transportation goes on in delivering something, whether it's first or final mile, increases in each leg of that can over time add even more. So capacity is lightening up, but again, sometimes when it lightens up, some of the guys that have um, a lot of equipment that they have loans on or whatever, or buying equipment, right? They start to get a little skittish of it, and they don't want to take out loans at high interest rates or continue loans at high interest rates. So, if when I talk to our broker friends, they say they almost have seen no impact at all to their business through through the month of June. So.
Yeah, I know there was a big push to, hey, we need more drivers, and then of course, I drove across the country a couple times in the last year, and I don't know how we get more trucks on the road, right? There's just a lot of trucks out there today, and it's more about using what we have. And to your point, I think it's things will probably continue to evolve as we go forward in this inflation and recession type thing that we're in now today. But what impact does the backup at the ports? And we've talked a lot about. I mean, at one point there was a picture of like 78, container loads out in the ocean just waiting to pull into the port. The ports were all backed up. They put in special things at Long Beach and that type of thing to kind of handle the volumes that they were having there, right? Again, another special committee, I'm sure. But what does that impact really have on the importers today?
Well, I think what's happened is, and you kind of talked about it earlier, right, with the inventory levels, but people are kind of banking or stocking inventory at higher levels. But again, it's not across the board as you think of semiconductors and those type of things, right? That's still in high demand and still hurting major industries. So, there are things that are happening that people are trying to deal with. The port, certainly the West Coast ports, the vessels are down of what they were at one time. But now, of course, what happened is people started routing them to the East Coast. And now the East Coast ports are starting to have some delays, not all of them, but some of them, right? And so it's an interesting balance of what's going on. And there are people looking for other ways to get freight here. I mean, certainly, they started when it was really high, right? They ran to air cargo to get stuff over. And of course, then that became the next bottleneck, right? Now there is enough capacity on the cargo planes, blah, blah, blah. You get, it's a vicious kind of circle here, but, it's good. And the costs are dropping, right? I mean, one point they were, you know, almost, well, not 10 times, 8 or 9 times what, it was pre-pandemic. Now maybe they're getting some relief. It's 5 times, right? So, but it's still a lot more than they were paying before. And you've seen it, the impact on the ocean carriers. They've had record profits over the past 2 years.
Yeah, and they're buying bigger and bigger ships, from what I've seen, right, to haul
Yeah.
more and more freight. So, we talked a little bit about that, the ups and downs. You talked about the financial part of it where, that's five, maybe sometimes at one point, maybe 10 times higher than normal. People were looking for alternatives. I know there were some companies, major name companies, that actually bought their own jets and started flying their product just to get it in, which was probably cheaper than trying to put it on a boat and getting it here. Do you see this getting better as we go forward? I know there's new ports that have been opened, Savannah. I mean, there's new ports, there's bigger ports, but do you see it getting better, or continuing with this kind of the bullwhip effect of up and down?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while for it to really level out. So I think it's some of both going on, right? I think you'll see as the companies are starting to adapt and do things they need to, as we talked before, the impact of the issues become a little bit less, right? And it's still hard to tell. I mean, COVID's coming back. I think I saw today the president has COVID now, right? And I don't know. All of a sudden, like they're testing in Shanghai or something, and now everything slows down because they can't get the vessels out of China. It becomes a kind of a vicious cycle, as I said before, right? But I think what I expect to see really is the response to the anomalies start to get a lot more predictive, right? Like people are knowing what to do now. If Shanghai is going to have a problem, how do I protect against that? Maybe the next time it opens up, I order more. I don't know, but um, it's important that the systems that folks are using can adapt to these situations, and even you start to use machine learning and those type of things to get a much smoother, if you will, impact instead of just this real high spike and then try to figure out what to do kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think companies have learned over the last couple of years of how to react faster. They've got it in their processes now. Their SOPs, hey, this is what you do if this starts to happen. We start to do things. I think to your point, they're probably using more data and visibility into their supply chains to say, what do we need to do to be better prepared for things if things start to potentially happen again? So what about, one of the things that's intriguing to me is the companies that I've heard that are starting to try to near shore or even onshore here in the US. What do you see that happens, and will that help any of the bottlenecks that are out there today? Or will that just cause more cost increases? I just don't know.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is, of course, it helps because obviously that demand isn't coming through the ports anymore. But the demand is just so high. I just don't know that it's really gonna impact a lot. Plus, the lead time to change is so long. It's funny. I was talking to a manufacturer at the beginning of what 2020, I think it was, right? But and they're like, all our stuff's tied up. We can't get it in. It's out of China. They're closed down. Blah blah blah. Right? And it was really impacting their business. And I asked them, "Are you going to nearshore?" Well, it's too hard. We're not going to do it. You know. Well, 2 years later, we are going to nearshore. It's going to take us a while, but we've got to do something to mitigate the risk of having all this stuff coming from China, right? So, it's lasted long enough now that people are starting to really look at that nearshoring option. But like I said, the demand from China is just so high, and I say China, it's really Far East, right? It's just so high. I think overall, it's going to be a while till that really changes the picture, right?
Yeah. One of the things, if anybody's learned it at all, and I've heard other people talk about it, we are a global economy. I mean, when there's things that happen in Europe or China or wherever, it impacts us here. Let's get a little more tactical. When we take a look at spot rates, and one of the things I was looking at was the ups and downs. I mean, it looked like that Richter scale when you have a major earthquake. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
Sure.
What are your thoughts on that? And is that going to continue, or will it ever just level off and kind of be a normal flow again?
I just don't see it doing that in the near term, right? The capacity challenges are just so dynamic these days, and again, the good news is we have systems to help identify that, and as these guys continue to look at reducing maybe their ordered trailers, and you talked about hiring drivers, maybe that slows down. Less drivers want to do long haul driving, right? They want the more regional kind of trips where they're not gone 10 days at a time or whatever it is. So all that places pressure on capacity. So with that, obviously the spot market uh, reacts to, and it's much more nimble in itself than it used to be as well. So, the digitization of the supply chain and the spot market in particular, you know, provides a lot of value for folks that need real time rating for loads. And you see that with digital freight stuff where shippers can go out and immediately get a quote from one of the freight providers, and it's guaranteed rate, and they don't have to go looking for a lot of ways. And that can happen just as a part of a normal, to your point, SOP, where if my contracted carriers can't move the freight, then it'll fall back, or my route guide carrier can't move the freight, then it'll fall back to the digital freight guys. And there's so many great opportunities out there as well, right? And what's kind of exciting to me when I start looking at it is, we didn't really touch on green savings or green cutting, being green or sustainability yet, but that's a big part of our future in this industry, right? I saw somewhere where we're the transportation industry in the U.S. is responsible for 28% carbon emissions, right? So, that's a big deal, right? And so why I bring that up now is, as I've talked to some of these digital freight providers, more and more of them are trying to include in what they're providing to customers, not just the price, but what is the green impact or what is the carbon impact for what this move does? Because a lot of times it's backhaul stuff for a lot of these guys, right? And it reduces the carbon footprint that can be shared maybe with somebody else. And it's a good thing, right? And it not regardless of politically where you fall on these things, not polluting and not doing these things is positive.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to and that's a great point, right? And I'm sure those will come up in other conversations as well. But I've got a brother who's in the trucking industry, and he's the same way. It's right. If I can haul from Washington to Wisconsin or Washington to Texas, and then I get a backhaul, it just makes that much better, use of his time as well as what I'm going to ask you about now, which is, we've talked a lot about fuel prices, and I kind of looking at it just from a personal standpoint, driving across the country, back when it first hit and we drove from Florida to Oregon or whatever it was, I think I spent somewhere between $600 and $700 on unleaded fuel. This last time was in a diesel, and we spent roughly $2,700 or $2,500 because of the price of fuel. And it really goes by state, by city. I mean, I've even found within a city, you can find different prices for fuel or diesel or gas. So a couple of questions. What have you heard and what have you seen regarding the fuel prices? And what can companies really do to drive that cost down if they're smart about it?
Well, I think the good news is, at least in the near past, we've seen a reduction, right, in fuel prices. I thought it was kind of interesting after the Juneteenth holiday, right? The EIA couldn't publish the index for like 2 weeks for some technical problem. I mean, they were still getting the data in, but they didn't publish it. And when they finally published, they were still at record levels, right? We had the five highest prices since they started doing this in 1994. The five highest prices occurred in June of this year. So, it's still high. And even though it's come down 37 cents over 4 weeks, the impact obviously to what our customers are paying for transportation fuel is still at record levels. And I think it'll continue to drop, especially as we get out of the summer. I mean, if you look historically, right, that happens. But areas like California are still very expensive. It's $1 more than the national average, I think, right now. And variability across the country, as you said. I mean, I got a corner over here with 4 gas stations, and there's 50 cents difference between the 4 gas stations. It's like, wow, what do you. And I guess it depends when they get the fuel and all that good stuff. But station owners are pretty enthusiastic about raising the prices when it's going up, but they seem a lot less enthusiastic to lower them when it starts dropping. So
Yeah.
it'll be a thing to see, because I'm sure it'll be sort of seesaw a little bit as we go through the next few months.
Yeah, I always wonder how much of the fuel was in the ground that they paid X for that they're charging X for now, and what's the difference? Their margin's going to be huge. But one of the things that's always kind of been on my mind too is, back in the pricing days of like with CF Motor Freight or CNF, and we looked at all the pricing. Whenever there's an increase in fuel, they usually accessorial charge hits, right? So to your point, a lot of the customers and shippers and that type of thing are paying more, right? Because a lot of that cost is being passed on, even though the carriers themselves are hitting the burden to start with, and then they have to collect on it. But it does get passed on, right? I mean, that's the truth of the matter. Yeah. So what impacts do you see that on the final mile and their accessorial charges?
Well, if you look at the parcel carriers, right, they've really changed what they do. I think they used to publish it every 2 weeks. Now it's weekly, because the volatility makes them want to make sure that they're building that into costs. If you look at what happened, right, fuel increased 125% in year over year kind of thing, but it's tripled as an accessorial charge for a lot of for the air shipments for sure, and for ground, right, fuel went up like 70%, but the surcharge doubled over the past, from 8% to over 17%. So you get the idea, right?
Right.
They've done carriers did this years ago. They built in this cost, and now they're making sure that they're not getting stuck with the increased fuel costs.
Right. So it's not just the parcel carriers, but it's really all modes, right?
Yep. Yeah, it is. obviously, uh, the truck carriers started in the 90s adding fuel surcharges, and the fuel costs, automatically adjust to your point. But the easiest way, though, to kind of combat this is obviously reducing how many miles your carriers are driving or carrying your goods, right? So there's ways to do that, whether it's like zone skipping a parcel, do final mile sort of thing, or optimizing to leverage backhauls or multi-pick, multi-drop loads. So these things can really cut miles out of your chain, and if you cut miles out, obviously you're saving on fuel. But you know, even during optimization, if you consider, or even selection, right? If you consider selecting a carrier based on things like maybe they use electric trucks or those type of things, there's all kind of ways to start to reduce your carbon footprint. And when you look at the future, right? Drones and autonomous vehicles doing sort of final mile stuff, basically get out of carbon footprint almost entirely, although there's might be some, what do they call it, like scope 2 kind of carbon or scope 1, whatever it is, but most of these come with limitations, of course, distance, size, weight. You can't put a pallet on a drone, right? Or at least today you can't. So, there's all kind of things that you have to contend with. And then when you get into the drone world, there's all kind of cultural things too. Are you replacing labor force with a drone? Are you, violating people's personal space? You always hear
Yeah.
the chuckle of someone saying, "Hey, if the drone comes lands on my property, I'm going to shoot it," right, or something like that, right? It's that type of world we're going to have to deal with. But I saw it recently, and you probably saw it too, where um, uh, Amazon's going to be doing deliveries and somewhere in Texas, College Station, I think, using drones. So they're already doing it in California or Arizona, one of those, and now they're going to start doing it in College Station. So the future's now with these things. I mean, they've got a long way to go yet, but it's gonna be here sooner, and the government's pushing for it. They want to get vehicles off the road, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's great. I'm a big golf guy, right? So I enjoy golf a lot, and I'm seeing drones now at every tournament. They're flying, and I'm waiting for somebody to hit one with a golf ball and see what happens. But to your point, it does bring up a lot of concerns, a lot of some of the work that I've done in the past with MercuryGate on drones, some of the conversations that we've had with companies. You're right. It's going to happen faster than people realize. And there's a lot of people that are in the play, right? They're in the game right now that are trying to figure out how to get their drones certified, all those types of things so that they can fly within city limits, that type of stuff. So it's going to be interesting. We've talked a lot regarding inventories earlier, right? And the inventory level, some people have too much, some people have too little. As we all know, that's really been caused by this fluctuation in the supply chain, right? I took a car in to get fixed. They couldn't find the part, whatever it was, right? So some say it is the bullwhip effect, but what can companies do to kind of offset that or right size and maintain a correct level of inventory, even in these kind of trying times, if you will?
Yeah. So I mean, you're right on, right? There's a lot of challenges that are happening all at the same time. So people can't get parts, as you mentioned. They're getting more demand for e-commerce, which folks want quick delivery for, right? They're spoiled by Amazon. They want stuff in 2 days. They don't want to wait a week. They don't want to pay for it. All these things that are contentious. And what's happened is, or what you're seeing, I mean, if you look at the market, the warehouse market's like hot, right? Like people are trying to do what Amazon did by spreading their inventory out more locally or regionally to reduce that transit time so they can get things to people quicker. And you even see stuff stuck in containers. I mean, there was a couple of vessels, one in the Suez Canal, one at Chesapeake, right? Where I mean, I think the one at Chesapeake was there for like a month, was stuck on a sandbar, right? So think of all the goods on a vessel stuck on a sandbar for a month, right? So, to me, it really comes back to the supply chain visibility and being able to see where things are, not just having the parts in the right place, knowing where your stuff is and being able to redirect it if you have to. So, the last thing you need is more stock showing up somewhere that has stock when you're out of stock somewhere in your supply chain. You can see that on the tools that are out there, right? You can see where these parts are, what's in it, and when they hit a port, instead of shipping it to warehouse 1, you ship it to warehouse 2, right? I think the Suez Canal ship was stuck for like a week and blocked 10% of the world commerce, right? I mean, yikes, that's a big impact. And it slowed down a week in a time when people are already sort of behind on things. It was critical. And we've talked before about a customer who utilizes their stores now as sort of e-commerce fulfillment thing. So if one store doesn't have the stock, they can order it from another store and get it there in another day or 2 days to the customer's house if need be, or to the store, either one. But they're doing that to make sure that they deliver in the time frame, because if they don't, people will just go buy it somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's the world we're in these days, and it's interesting to see how quick some of the companies have adapted to that stuff.
That's really being what I would say is agile, right? I mean, if you're able to take your direct to consumer product and ship it overnight from a DC, but all of a sudden, you're in the mode of shipping from stores first. And then you can go from one store to the next and the next to fulfill that order. And say, I ordered something in Portland, Oregon, or San Antonio, Texas, or whatever. I can go to that store and have them fulfill that order, and I get it that afternoon, right? That's pretty dynamic. That's pretty agile. So let's do this. Let's turn our thoughts toward MercuryGate, right? What is MercuryGate doing in response to this new normal, or the current situation that the supply chain is in today, which I believe is going to probably be more of our new normal. So how is MercuryGate evolving your solutions to really address these challenges that we've encountered over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we continue to grow and expand our system, of course. And we built our system to be adaptable, so folks can have different SOPs, as it were, based on types of product. If this product needs cold chain kind of stuff, you can monitor the temperature every hour, whatever the demands are, right? We've added a lot of stuff in the area of our digital freight offerings. So we get from think of the guaranteed kind of rate coming back sort of synchronously from some of the providers, to things where quotes actually come back, a quote response comes back, maybe not synchronously, but it's out there able to be leveraged should it be needed for that move. So we set up our system to manage both of those. We continue to expand our visibility products, right? And to do that, like we have one large customer that has a whole bunch of parcel that doesn't move through our system today. They're going to have it tomorrow, for lack of a better description, but they still want visibility to that today. So we get that data in and display that to them, so they can see across their supply chain all their transportation moves and understand the true picture of the transportation product that they have, right? We've grown our customer portal to allow our customers to access the data, to see where things are, stop those phone calls, free those people up to be able to do or focus on other things, not on just selling a package for a client. So those type of things are helping, again, just give more visibility and make people more efficient and effective. We're continuing our march to full autonomous logistics. Let the system plan and move the freight, and let the professionals deal with any anomalies that might come up. Right? So they don't need to go out and decide this or decide that. The system can make those decisions for them. And actually, we've proven to many of our clients that it makes it better than a lot do, just because it can do more algorithms quicker, right? And we continue to move that. We have customers that do their entire business autonomously in a complex final mile, where orders are dropping, returns are coming in, those type of things, right? Our rate and route optimization tools are getting stronger, more mature, and it's taking into not just comparing between the different service levels, which is critical. And again, think of service levels not just in rates, but maybe in uh, sustainability things, right? Like how much carbon does this carrier use versus that one? It's going to be interesting to see where all that gets driven as we look at sort of what the SEC is coming out with to go after, the level 3 kind of uh, quantitative needs for public companies. And it's going to be the trickle down of that's going to be fascinating. So yeah, only SEC or publicly traded companies need to do that. But if they're dealing with carriers, right? I mean, if you're an owner operator, even you may have to provide to Walmart what kind of truck you're driving, what kind of carbon you're burning, blah blah blah, right? So it's going to be an interesting kind of trickle down, and we're working on those things uh, as we move forward and continuing to showcase our reporting and intelligence capability to customers, right? Again, we want them to curate their data to make sure that, it's funny, one of the clients said, well, I want to see my cost per cube. Well, guess what? They weren't passing us any cube, so cost per cube was nothing, right? So anyways, but until you start to show that data to people, they don't realize what they're getting, right? So it's a strong suit to get to that, and MercuryGate's really pushing that more and more, and have even more things coming out in the fall. So
More of the machine learning and the AI and the capabilities around that. And I love the idea of working the anomalies and working the exceptions versus working everything. And I know we talked, you brought it up a little earlier about a company that changed their stores into distribution centers, right? That's the kind of support that a real good system can give to a company when they need it, right? So what, kind of taking, bringing up your crystal ball, because I know you're really close to the whole environment globally. What does the future look like, and how do we better manage? How does customers or carriers, whatever, better manage through that new world that we have?
yeah, so I'll continue my data theme here a bit, right? I mean, things just keep changing faster and faster, and we all know that's going to keep happening. And the speed of change, it's not linear, right? It's more hyperbolic. So it's really critical that people start focusing on data, and the visibility of that data is fundamental to their success. So predicting what's going to happen to freight, again, the anomalies that you mentioned, right? Um, we want people to be able to proactively address issues instead of waiting for, irate customers or, other things that might become situations for them. We want them to be able to deal with it while they're irritations, not situations, right? So we want to get to a world where the regular things all happen autonomously. If you think of the folks coming out of the universities today, this is what they're really striving to do, right? They want autonomous systems that now let them focus and do the thinking around the anomalies, or let the system ultimately even do predictive and prescriptive things through machine learning. We have one client running their entire, like I said, running their entire final mile fleet autonomously. It's incredible. And it took a while to get there. I mean, they didn't, weren't like day 2 of our implementation, they were running autonomously, right? But we gave them a path to migrate to that. And they flat out say, look, you have the best final mile solution out here, which is awesome. So, we're working to expand in that area, looking at having a courier network kind of thing with crowdsourcing, so that, 3PLs and shippers that don't know how to do final mile stuff can now leverage that to provide that to their customers, whether it's a shipper to the final customer or it's a 3PL getting the business done for a shipper. Both have the ability to utilize those things and get the regional couriers out there, because the parcel guys are tapped out, frankly. Right? I mean, they just can't pick up all this freight and deliver it locally, nor do they necessarily want to. And like I said, some of the scope 3 emissions, we're working to those to keep those things identified, not just based on what you moved. Obviously, you need that, but help you optimize to reduce those type of things. So building optimization plans that are driven by green savings is really a big plus for folks. And those are things we have on the roadmap, right? And then, I can't leave this area without talking about drones, right? You mentioned it. I mean, we're working with a large pharma company right now to help them pilot. We have a really cool drone thing, and I don't mean, hey, we're going to fly a drone for you. We're not so interested in that, right? But what we're enthusiastic about is, hey, I want to look at the whole delivery portfolio and which one of these loads or moves should be handled by a drone, maybe an autonomous self-driving vehicle, a Waymo, whatever it might be, right? Or maybe this needs to go parcel, this needs to go courier, this needs to go truck, right? I mean, we want to make the right decision, and then what we can do is, regardless of how you move it, can help manage the whole custody chain.
Yeah.
Through that process, getting signatures at the destination, maybe pictures, allowing the drone to release the freight to somebody once they've provided a signature. So that's what we're about when we talk about drones. We're not about, hey, we're flying the drone, although I love to fly drones, but it's more about the managing it from a logistics perspective. And it's really exciting to see this stuff, and we'll be maybe putting some videos out that show how this stuff works. I mean, it's really cool, and it's today, right? It's today in MercuryGate. So
Yeah.
we're excited to be part of that world and part of that innovative world.
Yeah, that's going to be, I have to put a plug in here for you guys, working on the Velocity Users Conference coming up in November this year. There'll be some things there around that, right? So that it'd be fun to see that and see it in action, see some things happening. Really excited about that. So Steve, again, I love talking with you. We ever since I joined MercuryGate back in whenever it was, 2019, 2018, we've always had really good conversations. Your wealth of knowledge on the environment. You're so close to a lot of the things that are going on. I can always come away with nuggets, right? Little nuggets here and there that you pop out that are just fantastic. And I appreciate your time. And also your efforts and willingness to join in on this and have a good conversation. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to Michael. Michael, do we have any questions from the group?
Sure. Thanks very much, Phil. And I'll echo the gratitude to you, Steve. Thanks so much for sharing all that information. A lot of great details. With the time that we do have remaining, we're going to try to start fielding some questions from our audience. I want to take an opportunity to remind you that there are a few questions already coming in, but to submit your questions, open the Q&A panel at the right side of your webinar viewer. If you don't see the Q&A panel, just look for the three dots at the lower right corner. Click those dots to open the Q&A panel. And it looks like we do have a question. We didn't talk much about this, Phil and Steve, but I know that, it's August is approaching. It's almost back to school. That opens a period of shipping that always is very busy, the peak season, back to school, followed by the holidays and Christmas. What do you foresee during peak season this year?
I see a lot of parcel, but I'll let Steve talk a little bit more about it. I do everything. I don't go to stores anymore. I just order online and have it shipped to me. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on the peak season that we have coming up?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, it's going to really be interesting. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you the last time I went to a mall, right? I mean, pretty much buy everything online now. I just can't see that changing. And what's going to be interesting is how the parcel guys respond. So we've seen what Amazon's done, right? They bought their own planes. They've doing their own deliveries locally. They're doing. I mean, you're going to see more and more of that courier kind of setup, and I think that's going to be the key in the peak season to ensure people get delivery when they need it. And then, of course, if COVID comes back and we start seeing supply shortages, could really change. And I mean, I think the problem is everything's kind of tapped, right? If you look at ocean, it's tapped. If you look at air, it's tapped. Parcel, so if there's a close down or something gets closed down somewhere, it's going to be tough, right? And
yeah, let me jump in there because you might know a little bit more. If I flip it around, I was looking at it from a consumer's perspective, but if I put put on my, my old Nike or Columbia hat. Now we're a retailer. We have to import all of our products. We have to get everything somehow into the U.S. or into whatever country it is for the holiday season. What do you see as the impact there? I mean, a lot of that's probably already it's on barges today, probably. But what would I have to do to kind of gear up for a peak season from a importer perspective, if you will?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, we're not demand planning kind of guys, but when these guys start looking at what they're trying to plan for, how do you plan the inventory, right? It's tough because of, the impact of what's going on in transportation as much as anything, right? So I don't know what they're doing per se. I'm sure they're overstocking some things and probably understocking other things. And none of us have a great crystal ball, so it'll be hard to minimize those impacts. But again, if they have the visibility to the chain, they'll at least know where things are and what corrective action they might be able to take once something hits a port or gets to a location. They might be able to do something different, right? So I think you'll see more of that, and I think air is going to probably start to take on a whole new kind of pressure again, even though again they're pretty much tapped out as well. But nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see how air cargo changes in the next couple of months. It'll probably be significant for the things that can go air, right? So
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it looks like we got a few more questions coming in. This is sort of on a related topic to that peak season. You talked a little bit about imports and ocean shipping, but looking at the peak season from the final mile perspective, we saw in recent years a lot of accessorial charges being applied for final mile and parcel shippers, as well as some volume caps on large shippers. How do you anticipate that peak season will affect last mile service and accessorial charges in these months ahead?
yeah, it's a great question. I mean, obviously, um, everyone's feeling the pain of those accessorial charges, whether it's, high density charges for in certain, areas or what do they call it, delivery area surcharges or their surcharges themselves. The caps are a big deal. We talked about the company that moved all their stuff to their stores. Well, they were capped by all the parcel carriers at the store. I can't go pick up 1,000 boxes at your store in Cary, North Carolina, right? I mean, it's that kind of a problem. And so there'll definitely be a push to couriers and looking for couriers, crowdsourcing of couriers. So it'll be interesting to see how that world starts to evolve more and more. I think each season you see that growing and growing to get things delivered locally. And I think this year will be the biggest yet. So, Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's going to be huge. I'm sitting here in my mind and I'm worried, not worried. I keep remembering that to what the question was. There's I know that certain parcel carriers had put caps on amounts that they were going to handle. What does that do, right? That, to your point, it's just going to drive more to couriers. It's going to drive more to, other people to handle that final mile delivery because they're not going to be able to handle the volumes that's going to hit them. So, that's where a good system comes into play, right? You got to have that ability to jump to that. You got to have the capability in there to actually do that and manage it. Especially if you're a 3PL or something of that nature and you're working with a bunch of your shippers and you got to help them out, get this stuff done. I just see the volumes being massive and it's only going to grow. We know that. So,
Yeah, part of the problem too is that it's kind of a foreign area for a lot of people, a lot of logistics companies for sure, and shippers even more so because they're so used to just turning stuff over to, parcel guys, right? And now all of a sudden the parcel guys aren't going to do it or they're almost prohibitive. So how do I get couriers? How do I do this? I don't know any, right? You know what I mean? It's an
yeah.
interesting problem, and it's somewhere I think we can help. So if whoever submitted the question, if you need to understand what we do with couriers, we'd love to talk to you. So
Yeah, I think you also brought up other ways of operational, right? So you can zone skip, you can do the things where you can, have a break bulk on the East Coast or have everything go to a giant facility in Dallas and then you go from there. There's other operational things that you can do, which is fantastic, right?
yep, yeah, good point.
And it does look like we've got another question. I want to invite our audience with the few minutes we have left to submit your questions for Phil and Steve. And guys, this goes to a pretty hot topic in logistics right now on the West Coast. I want to find out, what are your thoughts on AB5 and how it's threatening to create additional challenges to capacity and especially the flow of goods through California ports and into the U.S. supply chain?
Wow.
Great question.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, AB5 was passed really to limit Lyft and Uber, right? Well, they lobbied, got excluded from it, and now it's hitting carriers. So, the bigger carriers, I think I saw Swift and Warner, I think were the two I saw, have pretty much got rid of their independent contractors in California. But as we've all seen lately, the drayage carriers are really, not happy, right? I mean, these guys, they don't necessarily want to be employees of companies, and the state's gonna, I guess, make them. I don't know if that. I'm sure the verdict's out, but they're having strikes, right? Or at least slowdowns or blockages, I don't know, whatever you want to call that, of the roads around the ports, right? And it's crippling a lot of the freight getting out of, like, right now. I think it's Oakland this week, right? And it's fascinating. So I don't know if there's a big push to try to get them excluded too, or at least longer delay on it. I don't know what's going to happen there. Um, it's just interesting. I just don't think they have the same pool as the number of people, obviously, that are driving for Uber and Lyft, right? It's not the same numbers. So it's going to be a tough road if it goes that way. And there's a lot of carriers. Because, I mean, all these guys have to start to operate under someone else's authority, right? And it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that really, I mean, that's the point right there to me, right? It's about taking all these individual contractors that have owned their own trucks for years, done their own thing, they're running dray, and they like it, right? It's local, it's close, it's fast, whatever. And now they're being almost forced to go to work as maybe it's a consortium that comes together, like the fruit industry or whatever. And they say, hey, you know what? We're all going to come together under this moniker and we'll operate that way. There's going to be some major conversations coming up, and things happening, but and I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you. I really don't. I don't know what the to be perfectly blunt. I mean, I know why they were going after Uber and Lyft, right? Like a taxi driver. It's the same thing over and over. But people choose that life for a reason, and now you're telling them that they can't choose it. It seems a little backwards to me, but that's okay. We'll see how it comes out.
And this brings us to a point to conclude our webinar. Thank you very much to our audience for sharing some of your time with us today. Special thanks as well to our guests, Steve and Phil. Thanks for sharing a lot of great information with our audience.
You bet. Thanks, Michael.
Anytime.
To learn more about MercuryGate Smart Transportation Solutions, visit MercuryGate.com. That's where you can find out about TMS, claims management, final mile, and all the MercuryGate solutions for your modern supply chain challenges. You can also access regular transportation industry updates in our Knowledge Center. Just look for Logistics Landscape in the Industry Reports section of our Resources page. You'll get updated gas prices, spot rates, news insights, all that and more from our experts, our partners, and the transportation industry at large. Also, don't forget the blog at MercuryGate.com has plenty of information as well. When you visit there, look for the subscribe button, click it and sign up. We'll send you the latest blog as soon as it publishes every Tuesday and Thursday. On behalf of Steve Blough, Phil Melton, and everyone at MercuryGate International, I'm Michael Willard saying thank you for joining us for this look at the logistics landscape.